Welcome, TTB community. I am Bob Demena, and here with me, as always, is the unwavering Elliot Shibley.
Unwavering. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bob.
You're welcome.
So, before we get into the episode, before Bob continues to go on a rant, I will get into a few items that we have going on behind the scenes. Firstly, if you like our podcast and you want to know more about our guests, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We post all of our guest photos related to the conversation on those platforms. And we have a YouTube channel, which you can subscribe and get all of our latest episodes, which include little clips. It includes full episodes. It includes the Travel Roundtable series, which I'll get into later. And it includes 15-minute segments. And it sometimes includes fun videos that Bob and I might do on our own adventures. Lastly, we have a lot of stuff updated on our website. If you go to the website, you will be asked to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. If you do, you get a free travel cheat sheet that Bob has diligently worked on, and it'll just help you plan for your next trip. Just a few pointers to go over. We now have consulting services where you can work directly with Bob to plan your next trip in very detailed and meticulous detail. Yeah. We have a travel blueprint tutorial video, a series of them in production that will basically expand on the travel cheat sheet in a lot more depth. And to tie into that, we have a book/workbook in production, which will follow with the traveler blueprint tutorials. So the book will be a vast expansion on the cheat sheet, and the workbook will allow you to plan your next trip. And very excited, we have our own Philadelphia tour guide that you can book directly through our website. Kessler Leonard Tourism has 2 tours available, one on the history of Philadelphia and the other on something else very interesting that I do not remember offhand. Do you, Bob?
Yeah, it was the rail line, correct?
The rail line, yes, that's it. Yeah, so if you go and you book through our website, you can take a tour with Kessler.
Yeah, and those tours are exclusive to the Traveler's Blueprint website. You cannot book them anywhere else.
Yeah, it's very exciting. All right, Bob.
Very
Who is our
exciting.
guest today?
Our guest today is recurring. This is his 4th time on the podcast, which I think alone says something. He came to us maybe over a year ago now. We talked about Peru. We talked about ayahuasca and psychoactive drugs. He's come on to talk about Mesoamerican culture. We've talked about
Psychoactive drugs of the world.
Psychoactive drugs of the world. And today we're going to talk about animals that use drugs and animals that were used as drugs. So super
It's like
interesting.
It's like that episode of Family Guy where they start licking the frogs.
Right. Well, exactly like that. So
Came from somewhere.
Yeah, if you enjoy this podcast, definitely recommend you going back and listening to some of the older conversations we had with him. And without further introduction, please give it up for our next guest, Scott Light.
Welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint. Start designing your next adventure.
Scott, welcome back to the Traveler's Blueprint podcast. This is episode number 4 with you now.
Yeah, for Pete.
Right. For Pete. Now, we haven't even had it. You're the only 2 Pete, officially the only 4 Pete. This is pretty, this is remarkable stuff that we're doing right now. So today you're bringing us a new topic. Now, we've talked about the psychoactive drugs of Peru. Then we talked about the psychoactive drugs around the world. And now we're moving into animals. And you know what? Here, you take it.
Yeah, so today, thanks for having me back. I love doing this. I really appreciate you guys having me on so often. And I hope your listeners enjoy the show. But yeah, today we're going to talk about animals which use drugs, and if we have time, we may talk about animals which are used as drugs by people. It's going to be all over the world and all sorts of species of animals, and we'll just jump right into it if you guys want to.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Where are you taking us first?
Well, so before the show opened up, I asked the guys if they wanted to hear something very sensational and crazy, but we won't start immediately with that. We'll start with something else, a related topic though. So I think it was in the mid 2000s, they had built these little submersible cameras, which they would disguise as like a a turtle or a nautilus. And they were basically filming underwater, wildlife, and it was camouflaged as another animal so that the fish or the dolphins or whatever they were filming wouldn't get spooked. So they were, I don't know where they were. They were in the ocean. I don't know where it was, but they were filming a pod of young male dolphins. And it seems that for some reason, the young male dolphins are the ones that do this more than any, the older dolphins or female dolphins or whatever.
Experimental teenage boys.
Exactly. Yeah. Single young male dolphins. So the turtle, I think it was, that had a camera on it, a robot turtle. It filmed the young male dolphins. They're basically attacking a pufferfish, but they weren't trying to kill it or eat it. The pufferfish contains tritatotoxin, which we talked about in a previous episode with the Haitian zombies, and it's a powerful toxin, but it's also a psychoactive. As we discussed before, it's used in Japan as sashimi, the fugu, and yeah, it has this really, really strong chemical in it. But basically, the dolphins were making the pufferfish angry, and it would blow up and release the toxin, tritatotoxin, and related compounds. And the young male dolphins one of them would bite it and kind of swim around for a little bit, and then he would pass it off to a friend. And the dolphins would become intoxicated off of this pufferfish venom. And they seemed to actively seek out the pufferfish. And basically, they knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. They were trying to get high.
That's really interesting. Dolphins are fascinating. Isn't it true that we don't understand like a majority of their language? We don't even really understand fully how they're communicating and the full scale of their intelligence?
Well, I'm not exactly sure about that. I don't know too much about dolphins and marine life, but yeah, I think we have discovered that they have certain vocalizations that definitely mean certain things. I believe I read a study that basically they recorded the vocalizations of certain dolphins, such as a warning vocalization, and they would play it to another group and the group would scatter and things like that. So I think we've actually deciphered some of dolphin language, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Cool. So while we're on the subject of dolphins, we'll talk about the strangest thing I've ever heard. And this is the strangest thing I've ever heard. If there are any children in the room, they should leave. And this is not directly related to psychoactives, but it's sort of on the same subject of interaction of humans and dolphins. So in the northeast of Peru is the city of Iquitos. It's the largest city in the world that cannot be reached by car. It has to be reached by plane or by boat. So, and it's kind of I wouldn't personally recommend anyone go there. It's a little bit dangerous. It's sort of the center of the ayahuasca tourism, the modern day ayahuasca tourism. And, that's fine. Like people need, they need sources for ayahuasca. I think that's a legitimate thing, but it's become such a big tourism industry there. There's a lot of unscrupulous shamans, and I'm putting shamans in parentheses there, who kind of prey on naive gringos and sort of just take their money and don't deliver the best experience. However, there's also really good ones there, but that's a story for another time. So there's this myth, these stories in Iquitos about these dolphins that will transform themselves into men or sometimes women, and they will come on into the town or village. And it's not just in the city of Iquitos, but in this whole general area, the Amazon. And they will seduce young men or young women. And they always wear a hat. And if you take their hat off, they'll still have a blowhole. So if you're ever being seduced in Iquitos by a beautiful young lady or man, make sure you take off their hat and check if they have a blowhole and it's not a dolphin. Because it's said sometimes that they will, they may lure the person into the water and then drown them. Or sometimes if a lady or a girl is, she has a boyfriend or a husband and she happens to get pregnant, but it's not by her husband, she'll say, oh, the dolphins seduced me. It wasn't my fault, because it's like a magical spell that they put on you, and they're basically irresistible. So that's an excuse for having a child out of wedlock in certain parts of the Amazon. But that's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. The craziest thing I've ever heard. So I was drinking with my buddy Arturo, who is a Peruvian guy. We were in Tarapoto, which is a bit south of Iquitos. And he started telling me this story about men in Iquitos who, there's these clubs and discotecas near the river. And they would get drunk and go down to the river. And the dolphins would actually beach themselves. The dolphins were doing this willingly. And men would have sex with dolphins. Apparently, the dolphin's anatomy looks a lot like a female's. And yeah, this is a thing. I didn't really believe him. I was like, dude, there's no way that happens. But I looked it up and I asked some other Peruvians, and apparently that's true. And Arturo got a little upset. He was like, man, have you ever heard the noise that a man and a dolphin make when they're having sex? It's terrible.
Oh my God.
I was just dying laughing. But yeah, that's the strangest thing I've ever heard. I can't top that.
So are these like river dolphins?
Yeah, they're the pink river dolphin. They have a very strange twisted beak. So their mouth actually opens like vertically instead of horizontally. And I guess they can catch fish more easily that way.
But I guess what is the reason? So, and I mean, this is how coronavirus is going to spread. They're going to make a new one.
Yes. Yeah.
They're going to make a new one down there.
There's going to be the dolphin virus.
Yeah. Come on now. This is, whoa.
Yes. I told you it was crazy. But apparently, I think some of the mythology about the dolphins seducing people came from this practice.
So it's just drunk guys who can't get human women.
Yep.
Who then? Now the dolphins, the population of dolphins, know, like, okay, let's just chill on the riverbank. Maybe around this time at night, the human beings will come, and we just beach ourselves.
Exactly.
And we get laid.
Exactly.
And then we go back into the river. Now, I have a few questions.
Yeah, I bet.
How long can a dolphin stay out of water without dying?
Well, I mean, dolphins breathe air, right? So I suppose that.
Bob, what kind of question was that?
Wait. So, yeah, I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean,
but they don't need to be in water?
No.
So a dolphin, no, but it can't.
It's designed for water, but they can breathe on land.
Right, but isn't there something that their skin needs to stay?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Right?
I would imagine you couldn't like take a dolphin home and put it on your couch and just hang out with it for a couple days. But,
yeah.
But and I think
long
whales,
enough, I guess. All right.
Yeah, long enough. I think whales, because of their huge mass, if they beach themselves, their own body sort of begins to crush them, because they don't have the buoyancy of the water. But the dolphin being so much smaller, I think it doesn't seem to have a problem with it. But there's reports of there was a researcher in the United States that was investigating dolphin sexuality, and there's also reports of dolphins raping like scuba divers and stuff.
I have heard that.
So have I.
Yeah. So that'll lead us into something else.
Oh, geez.
Slightly more scientific and a little less strange. So animals of higher intelligence, like monkeys, like dolphins, mammals. I'm not aware of any reptiles that use drugs, and I don't know if that's because they're sort of lower intelligence or what it is. But these animals of higher intelligence seek out drugs and sex as recreation. Dolphins are known to, obviously, as we talked about, recreationally have sex, not just for procreation. So pleasure seeking and altering the mind seems to be something that more intelligent or higher animals do. And the reptiles and things like that, as far as I'm aware, I haven't found any references in my research to reptiles using drugs. It's only mammals. And actually people, it's been noted in some studies that people of higher intelligence tend to use drugs more than people of lower intelligence. Although it may, depending on what you're doing, it may ruin your life, and it's not a very intelligent practice if you're, drinking too much or whatever it may be. But point being, more intelligent people tend to use drugs more often.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So, as we're talking about this, there's a really popular video on YouTube that you guys can look up. It's from an old documentary, I think from like the 50s or 60s, where they're in Africa, and they, a certain time of year, these trees in the African savannas, they fruit, and the fruit ferments, and then things like elephants, boars, monkeys, and other animals will get drunk off this fermented fruit and be stumbling around and falling all over the place. And they're pretty blasted from the fruit. Now, that practice, we're not sure if the animals they're probably seeking out the fruit for sustenance, and the psychoactive effects are secondary, but we do have many examples of animals who are just looking to get high. But that one might not be one.
So the one that I hope you're going to talk about it are the lemurs in Madagascar.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are lemurs in Madagascar, and also I found out that capuchins in the Amazon do a very, very similar thing. They will seek out a certain type of millipede, and the millipede has venom in it, which has a psychoactive effect if taken in a proper dose. I think if they were to eat the whole thing, it would probably kill them. But what they do is they make it angry, they piss it off, they like slap it against a tree or they bite it or something, and it begins to excrete this venom. And they'll kind of lick it, and then they rub it all over their body. It has two effects in that it has a psychoactive effect. They appear to be drugged. They start like drooling and staring off into space, and kind of like a little bit of foam coming out of their mouth and stuff. They look pretty blasted. But the secondary effect is that it's an insecticide, so that it could prevent bites from mosquitoes that carry diseases like malaria or dengue, which monkeys and apes can also get just like humans can. And, we need to think about this in evolutionary terms. So the monkey gets a reward of a high by using the millipede, but it probably developed because it was an insecticide, and the monkeys that used the millipedes were more resistant to diseases and were able to pass on their genes to the next generation. So it's bred in their evolution, basically, and they've probably been doing it for thousands or tens of thousands of years.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. Do you guys know who Tycho? Go ahead. You're going to ask something?
No, go for it.
Okay. Do you guys
I'm just taking this all in? Taking it all in.
Yeah. This is. I love this subject because it's so strange, and it's a very not a very well known subject at all. There is one book about this subject. It's called Psychedelics and Animals. It would be much better if the title was Psychoactives and Animals, because really in only one of the cases with the reindeer and the Amanita muscaria could we say that it's a true psychedelic. A psychedelic is, for those who don't know, I know you guys do, is your sort of classic psychedelics like magic mushrooms, peyote, and ayahuasca. But most of the drugs that animals are using would be better classified as psychoactives, such as the fermented fruit or the millipede. But of course, we don't know exactly what's happening in the mind of these animals. So anyway, the book is called Psychedelics and Animals. It's by a guy, I think his last name's Samarini, something like that. And that's one of my sources for a lot of this information. Oh, also, while I'm on the subject of sources, there's another YouTube video. It's just put in BBC Peculiar Potions. And they have a whole 30-minute episode about various animals that use drugs and intoxicate themselves.
BBC did that.
BBC did that I think it looked like it's from the 80s or 90s.
Oh, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and it talks about, cats and catnip, the reindeer. Well, let's talk about hedgehogs really quick. Hedgehogs are like insane, and they seem to, they're kind of like wild and don't seem to care about their health. They really actively seek out psychoactives, sometimes at the detriment of their health. The hedgehogs they need to go to rehab apparently.
Yeah, well, is that why Sonic seems like he always just did a line of cocaine?
Maybe. But in the Peculiar Potions YouTube video, these hedgehogs are like opening cans of paint and other like creosote and really noxious chemicals, and they just go for them and just eat them. And while they eat them, or after they eat them, their mouth will foam up, and they'll spread this foam from their mouth all over their spines and on their back. And that's also thought that it may have an insecticide effect, or it could be a deterrent to predators, because the predator smells the hedgehog and it smells like paint thinner or something, and it doesn't want to eat it. And the hedgehogs sort of go into a comatose state for like 20-30 minutes, and then they wake up and they're fine. I don't know if they have really powerful little livers or what the deal is, but
junky little animals.
Yeah, the hedgehogs are pretty crazy. Do you guys know who, I might say this wrong, I'm always terrible with pronunciation. Do you know who Tycho Brahe I believe he was a philosopher or something.
No, you don't.
Okay, well, I should have looked this up, but I think he was some sort of like, I think he was a contemporary of Isaac Newton or somebody like that. But if people want to know the true story, they should look it up. But I think 1700s, 1800s, something like that, maybe before. But he had a moose. He had a pet moose, and he would bring it to parties, and they would get the moose wasted. Like, they would give it a giant trough of beer, and the moose would just drink it and fall around and stumble all over the place. And this was great fun at parties, and they would ride the moose and do all sorts of crazy things with this moose.
I have heard of moose getting drunk off of fermented pumpkins.
Oh, really? I have not heard that. That's interesting.
Especially after Halloween and Thanksgiving, all of the pumpkins that are just sitting in people's gardens or on their stairs in places like Maine or Alaska or Canada, they'll just like grab the pumpkin, eat it, and it'll be partially fermented, and then they'll get drunk.
Very interesting. But see, that would be, to me, another thing where I'm not sure if the moose is seeking it out for sustenance, and then the secondary effect is a psychoactive, or if it knows that it's going to get drunk off the fruit.
Right.
Yeah. I think for the most part, it's just sustenance.
I think so as well. I would agree. Yeah, because I mean, it's obviously a readily available food source, and animals, like everyone, like to eat food and have nutrients.
Right.
But there are many other cases of like with the millipedes and the monkeys, where it seems that they're seeking out the well, another great example is cats and catnip. Cats don't get any sustenance from catnip, or maybe a very, very minimal amount if they eat it. But my cat last night, so I was researching this stuff, and I was like, oh, I need to give my cat some drugs, because I'm reading about all this
for science. Yeah,
for science. Yeah. So I put a lot of catnip, like a really big pile, on a plate, and I kind of rubbed it in my hands and broke it up. And I thought that the cats would just like take a little bit and then leave it for later. I have 3 cats, so I figured they would all use it. Well, the mother cat, the oldest one, she went over to it and just like stuck her face in the plate and rubbed it all over her body, spread catnip all over the house, and was so high. Like, my wife kind of was mad at me. She was like, I can't believe you got our cat this high. And I was like, look, she chose to do it,
Right.
Yeah, so I didn't make them.
I have 2 cats. I've never seen a cat high on catnip. I thought it had a mellowing effect, but it doesn't, right?
So last night, my cat, I saw her walk by, and I didn't know what she was doing, and then I heard all this noise, and she was rolling around in the catnip, and her pupils were dilated, like you almost couldn't see any color in her eye. They were just black. And she was rolling around and sort of kittenish like behavior, playing with stuff. And that lasted for about 30 minutes where it seemed stimulating and she was running around the house and stuff like that. And then she just conked out and went to sleep for the rest of the night, actually. So it seems to have a stimulating and then a sedating effect after a certain amount of time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. There's also so catnip will have a calming effect on humans, a very mild calming effect. Some people actually smoke catnip as a cannabis substitute, but it's very, very mild. Now, we don't know exactly what happens in the mind of the cat when they ingest catnip, but it seems to be very different from what happens to humans. And it seems much more powerful in the cats. One interesting thing is that it seems to work on almost all species of cats, but within a species, it'll only work on a certain amount. You know, it may be 50%, it may be 80%, I'm not sure. But there's certain cats that either they're not interested or it just doesn't affect them. You know, just like there's humans that don't drink, there are certain cats that are like, no, I'm Catholic, I don't drink or whatever. But point being, humans and cats obviously have different brain chemistry, so the catnip has a different effect on them than it does on us. And while we're on the subject of cats, if you ask native people in the Amazon, depending on which culture you're in, how did you guys discover ayahuasca? One of the answers they will give is, oh, well, we've always known about it, which is kind of like okay. The other answer is sometimes they'll say we learned from tobacco. The spirit of tobacco taught us this. They would smoke or chew or snort tobacco. And they say that the grandfather tobacco spirit told them to use ayahuasca. However, the other answer is that the jaguars taught us to use it. And jaguars will seek out the ayahuasca plant and they will chew the leaves and the bark of it. And they're probably doing this as a purgative. Most of these things have two effects. Just like cats and dogs will chew grass when they're sick to make themselves puke, the jaguar will ingest the ayahuasca leaves and small branches to make itself purge. However, and if you watch the Peculiar Potions from BBC, you can see a video of a jaguar which appears to be inebriated by the ayahuasca plant. Now, they're not using the DMT containing portion, the psychotria. They're only using the vine portion, which contains beta carbolines. But, you know, we don't know exactly what kind of effect that would have because they have different brain chemistry. But they certainly seek out ayahuasca and become inebriated on the ayahuasca vine.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, that humans probably observed the jaguar eating the ayahuasca vine and saw some of the effects from it, and then they said, hey, let's try it as well, you know. So this is a theme throughout the world in that humans have in many times learned from animals to use drugs. So in I believe I want to say it's Gabon, but somewhere in Africa, there are gorillas that seek out the Tabernanthe iboga plant, which is iboga contains ibogaine. There's also another plant called Alternea. It's in the Alternea genus. And these are used as aphrodisiacs at lower doses and as a visionary psychedelic at higher doses. But the people say that they learned of this practice from the gorillas. And the gorillas, they know how to dig up the roots. And the roots are very bitter. So in this case, we can be fairly sure that they're not ingesting it as a nutritive, as sustenance. They're ingesting it strictly as a drug. And they not only know how to dig up the plant, but they know how to distinguish the exact plant from the hundreds or thousands of other species in the jungle in this area of Africa. So they actively seek out this, and it seems to be strictly for drug use, not sustenance.
It always interests me thinking about how humans came to use, eat, and understand the environment. You always hear, who was the first person to try this? Who was the first person to drink milk from a cow? Who, all of those things interest me.
Absolutely. And that's one reason why it's so important. I mean, basically, I think one of the ways they did it was, watching animals and things like that. But at some point, somebody just had to experiment. And
Right.
there was actually a tribe, I believe, or a native group in North America where the initiation of the young boys was for them to try a plant unknown to the tribe. So that, or that they know about the plant, but no one's ever eaten it. So the young men would be given a mixture or a plant that they don't know if it's edible, medicinal, whatever. Sometimes nothing would happen to them, and they would just say, oh, that's a tasty root, and it's good, you're initiated. And other times they would like get sick and die. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but who was like the first person to pick a mushroom off of a piece of cow poop and eat it?
So Terence McKenna has the stoned ape theory. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but this is basically the idea that humans in Africa, 60,000, 100,000 years ago or whatever, basically that our evolution was sped up by the use of psychoactive and psychedelic plants. And Terence proposes that on the plains of Africa, there were not a huge amount of food sources. So during times of famine or when there wasn't much food, people would have been likely to try many, many things because, they were willing to take the risk because they were starving. So the mushrooms like Psilocybe cubensis that grow on the dung of not only cattle, but, the African buffalo and things like that would have definitely been noticed by these early humans. They're pretty conspicuous. You can even see them from a distance sometimes. They're soft and you can just pop them right out of the ground and eat them. So humans in ancient Africa likely would have tried the Psilocybe cubensis and other mushrooms. Now, if you eat a small amount of it, a small amount of psilocybin, it increases visual acuity. I think I said that right. There was a study done in the 1960s where people who had taken a small dose of psilocybin could notice quicker when they had two lines on a screen, and the lines would skew, and they were parallel and then they would skew. And the people on a small dose of psilocybin could notice when those lines skewed way before people who were stone cold sober. So that tells us that it increases, your vision. And basically, if you're walking around hunting and a monkey or something moves slightly in a tree, the person who is slightly, who has a small amount of psilocybin in their body will be able to see that movement easier than someone who is not. So that's the first evolutionary advantage to small amounts of psilocybin.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Joe Rogan talks about it, and he's had Dennis McKenna on his podcast. But a lot of fighters, like UFC fighters or people who are training in MMA, will microdose the mushrooms. And they'll say that it enhances their reaction time when fighting somebody.
Wow, that's interesting.
They'll actually take it almost daily in minor doses.
Right.
Just enough to have that enhancement in their motor skills, but not to impact anything else.
Right. I mean, obviously, if you take too much, you're not going to be hunting at all. You're going to be laying in the hut just, tripping.
Right.
But I do want to just say that it was actually Terence McKenna that proposed this. Dennis McKenna is an amazing person and an awesome scientist. I actually met him about 2 years ago. Great guy. But it was his late brother, Terence McKenna, that proposed the stoned ape theory.
Okay.
And so the second part of it is that small amounts of psilocybin also increase sexual desire. So the humans that had ingested small amounts of psilocybin were better hunters and likely to have more babies, thus passing on these genes. Yeah. So in addition to all these other animals that use psychoactives, we also have crows and rooks and other birds will sometimes dust themselves, or it's also known as anting. And they will basically sit down in an anthill and sort of smack it with their wings and make the ants angry. And the ants will come out and spray compounds like formic acid and other natural insecticides. However, some of the birds seem to become addicted to doing this and will basically sit on an anthill all day. Now, it's not all the birds. It's only a small minority. Just like in humans, it's, not everyone gets addicted, but some do. Other birds will seek out medicinal plants or tobacco or things like this to put in their nest, which prevents insects and parasites from affecting their chicks. So that's not necessarily a psychoactive use, but a medicinal use. But it's pretty amazing to me that a bird, which doesn't seem like the most intelligent animal to me, but that a bird will know what these medicinal plants are and seek them out and put them in their nest to protect their young.
Right.
And while we're on the ants real quick, there's a certain ant, and I can't remember which species it is, but a certain ant, it keeps, I don't know if it like captures the beetle or if they live in symbiosis with the ant or what, but this beetle excretes a psychoactive compound, and I do not know what chemicals it contain. And this sort of goes against the thing I said earlier of higher animals only being the ones that use psychoactives, but this is the only reference I could find to an insect actively seeking out a psychoactive. But they keep this beetle in their nest. The beetle excretes this stuff. If anything attacks the beetle, the ants go crazy and try to kill it. And also, if there's like a flood or something, the ants will take the beetle to higher ground before they take the larva, their own children. So they let their own children drown before they let their drug stash get washed away.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it may confer some type of benefit to the ants, but we're not exactly sure.
It's a testament to how powerful these drugs can be. And without having any background in this, I'm just going to assume that the reason behind most of the drug use with these animals is the euphoric sense that they get. They're obviously not seeking some sort of mind expanding experience. It has to be a sensational experience for the body, right? In most of these cases.
I would think so. The only exceptions to that might be the reindeer who use Amanita muscaria. And Amanita muscaria it's not a classic psychedelic like the magic mushrooms. This is the Mario mushroom, which we discussed before, but it definitely has more of a psychedelic component than most of these other plants and drugs we've talked about. So yeah, I won't discuss it again. If you guys want to hear about the reindeer, go back to, I think it was episode number 2 that I did, or maybe 3 with you guys, and check that out.
Mm-hmm. I think it was 2.
No, I think it was 2, because last time we talked about the Aztec entheogen complex.
Correct.
Yeah. So in addition, we'll shift gears a little bit here. In addition to animals that use drugs, there are humans that use animals as drugs. And the use of animals as medicine is known as ethnozoofarmacognosy, or if they're specifically psychoactive or psychedelic animals, it's entheozoofarmacognosy, which is a heck of a word.
But that is one heck of a word.
Yeah, ethnozoofarmacognosy is the study of humans' use of animals as medicine. So bugs as drugs, if you will. So the one famous one is, but not a very good one, I don't think, is the Spanish fly. Many people have probably heard of Spanish fly. It's an aphrodisiac. I'm not exactly sure how it's used, but I don't think it's very good or effective. I think it sort of fell out of use. I think it's kind of more of an irritant. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but apparently men will somehow take this in order to be more potent in the bedroom. But there's much, much better aphrodisiacs than that. Like yohimbe is a really good aphrodisiac if anyone should need one. While we're on the subject of aphrodisiacs, this is not an aphrodisiac. You would never want to use this. The Brazilian wandering spider, its bite can cause priapism, which is a dangerous and powerful erection, and most often men have to be hospitalized after they're bitten by this spider because they have a strong, long-lasting erection that will not go down on its own. And they actually have to, if you have this, they have to stick a needle in you and remove out the blood before it clots. Or you could have to have your parts amputated if you do not get the clotted blood out of you.
Oh,
Oh
man.
my God.
Well, wait, what is it about the spider bite that causes the blood to concentrate in that area?
So it's just it's a cocktail of chemicals, and actually I think this may be the most dangerous spider in the world. There's not very many spiders that will kill you, and I think this is one of them. But even then, it doesn't kill very many people. It just gives them powerful erections. but I don't even want to go to Brazil after reading this anymore. It's like I'm good. It just sounds
yeah.
horrible.
Well, you'd be the guy to go into the jungle too.
Yeah, exactly. That's where they live.
Right.
But yeah, it contains a cocktail of compounds, and one of them is something like Viagra. So it just leads to, I'm not exactly sure the mechanism of how Viagra works, but I think it's a similar chemical that these spiders inject into people.
Yeah, I don't know how Viagra works, how it concentrates the blood flow to that specific region of the body.
Yeah, me neither. And this priapism thing can happen from Viagra as well. So, people should be very, very careful with that, because that sounds really terrible to have that
Here's
happen.
our public service announcement. If
Yeah,
you have an erection
yeah,
lasting
right.
more than 4 hours, please see.
Be careful with Brazilian wandering spiders and Viagra, or
Yeah.
you may have to go to the doctor. One of the most, have you guys ever heard of this this like deer antler velvet stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I know, man, I think, a guy that I work with it was a supplement. It was like in a bottle, and I think it was called like deer antler or something like that. Yeah. And he was like, "You want some deer antler?" And I said, "No." I don't know what it's used for.
Right. Yeah. I think it's this sort of velvety stuff that is on, like this sort of powdery stuff that's on the outside of the antler.
Mhm.
And it contains like steroids or some sort of compounds.
A growth hormone of some kind.
Exactly.
Right.
So
He's a very big guy, muscular.
yes. So bodybuilders and fighters and stuff will use the deer antler, but it's steroids are something that I would never recommend to people. It just doesn't seem worth it. I would just say work out more, because it can cause all sorts of issues with your testicles and your body, and then your body can't make its own testosterone after you do it, and all these weird things. So yeah, I would kind of stay away from that one. But up to people, of course. It is a supplement that you can just buy online.
The deer antlers, but so that's actually what it is. It's a type of steroid that enhances muscle building in some way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's it's easily obtainable. Not that I'm recommending anyone do it.
Right.
Probably one of the most famous animals that are used as drugs would be Bufo alvarius, which is the Colorado river toad or the Sonoran desert toad. And it's been reclassified into another genus, and I can't remember the other genus, but if you Google Bufo alvarius, you'll find information about it. It lives obviously in Colorado and the Sonoran desert. And it has these big glands sort of behind its eyes. They're actually bigger than its eyes, these big, huge glands. And this, from what I can tell, this is a modern practice. Nobody, I'm not aware of any ancient cultures that did this, but people will squeeze the glands of these frogs over like a plate or a piece of glass or something. And then that venom will squirt out. It's like a whitish, yellowish venom, and they'll then let it dry, and you stick it in a pipe and you smoke it, and it contains DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, bufotenin, and related compounds. So it's basically like smoking DMT, and you blast off into hyperspace and talk to machine elves and things like that.
Can you describe what a DMT trip or experience is like?
Yeah, sure. So DMT and 5-MeO-DMT are what are in the toad. And so DMT is produced by the brain at certain times in one's life. And actually bufotenin, another compound in it, is produced by schizophrenics in much higher amounts. And it may be one of the reasons why they're constantly hearing voices and all these strange things. They've noticed that schizophrenics have really high amounts of bufotenin in their urine, which sounds horrible. So it's basically like they're tripping all the time and they can never stop, which sounds really terrible.
Ooh,
But
Yeah, not fun.
no, not at all. But the DMT experience is, DMT is an ayahuasca, so that would be an oral DMT, and that can last, 4 to 6 or 7 hours. Ayahuasca is, of course, a compound drug, a mixture of DMT and beta carbolines. But the DMT pure is often smoked, and you basically smoke it and you go to another place. Terrence McKenna is the best one. Back to Terrence McKenna. Listen to his stuff about it. He describes smoking it and entering another dimension, and you often will meet with these beings. He calls them self-transforming machine elves. So sometimes they're insectoid, like giant robot praying mantises and things like that. And you'll also see kaleidoscopes and, crazy colors. It's probably one of the most powerful visionary substances on earth, if not the most powerful. But one great thing about DMT, now this is illegal in the United States, so go to Peru or something if you want to do it. But one of the great things about it is that because it's made by the body, your body chemistry knows how to process it. So it's very, very safe. You can't overdose on it. And because your body knows how to process it, the experience only lasts about 10 or 15 minutes. And then you're basically completely back to normal, except for the intense, download of information you just received from entering another dimension and talking to, aliens and whatnot. But other than that, you're back to normal.
That's why people take it, right? To sort of enter this new realm and see if they can gather up some sort of beneficial experience to use in their normal real life.
There was actually a forum that I was on a number of years ago, and these guys they would do like synchronized blast off, where they would, set a time. They would use like, Eastern Standard Time at 12 noon. We're all going to smoke DMT at the same exact time, and they would try to find each other in hyperspace to see if they could connect with one another. And they had some sort of, that they would write something down on a piece of paper and not tell anybody, and see if the other guys could tell them what they had written on this piece of paper, basically to prove that they were getting legitimate information from this experience and able to actually contact other beings or other conscious beings. I don't know what happened, unfortunately. I'm not sure they ever got to anything.
This is interesting because I was just listening to, again, going back to Rogan, he had an astrophysicist on the podcast, and they got onto the topic of consciousness and what it is. And on the one hand, you have people who think that we are essentially tapping into something. We have evolved to be capable to tap into some sort of, not a radio wave, but some sort of wave that exists that we're pulling information from. And that's what consciousness is. And then you have the scientists who are just who believe that the consciousness is just the conclusion or the end result of brain activity, of the atoms and the cells reacting in a certain way that then create the capability for us to even have this consciousness. And that's all it is. And so, and that seems to be more likely to me. I guess everybody's different, but the interesting thing is, or the thing that helps push that point is that when you do throw in a drug, your consciousness changes, and therefore it's just, you can then go back and say, okay, you're changing the chemistry, your consciousness changes. Therefore, our consciousness is a result of brain chemistry and not really tapping into some other dimension to pull that from.
Right. I would tend to agree with you, and I tend to lean in that direction. But the only thing that would make me sort of lean in the other direction is that shamans and curanderos, especially in the Amazon or all over the world, really, they sometimes can get information. Like, one thing they'll do is they can find lost items, or this is a common thing that shamans do all over the world. You're like, hey, I lost my keys. I'll work on your farm for 6 hours if you trip out and tell me where my keys are. And they'll be like, your keys are in the left-hand drawer in your house. And then you go in there and open it and your keys are there. And there's documented cases of this. So this is pretty strange. I have one quick story, and then we'll get back to animals, which are used as drugs. So I was in the Amazon taking ayahuasca with my friend Tomas, and we were with the shaman Don Alberto, who is just an amazing, amazing man. He's Machinga and Huachipiri native. And so me and Tomas, we had seen a jaguar walking down the path, and it was like we were following it, and we could see its tail sort of whipping around the path as we followed it. Well, we went outside and we took a pee, and Tomas came at the same time as me, and we were looking at the stars. We were quite far away from the hut, and we were speaking in English, and Don Alberto does not speak English. And I said, yeah, man, I saw a jaguar walking down the path. And he was like, dude, I did too. And we were like, wow, that's really crazy that we saw the same thing. But, that's not that crazy. We're in the jungle. We're thinking about jaguars, whatever. So after the ceremony's over and we're sitting with Don Alberto, he sort of just asked, how was it? And we were like, oh, it was good. And he was like, you and Tomas saw the jaguar walking down the path. And we just looked at each other like, what in the world? How did he know that? And a similar thing has happened to my wife, actually. When she took ayahuasca, she saw a small child, a girl. And Alberto, without being prompted in any way, shape, or form, we had not talked at all. He goes, you saw your daughter. That's Scott and your daughter. And, one day she's going to be with you. And we were just like, oh my, and I didn't know what he was talking about, but Isabel almost started crying and was just like, oh my God, I can't believe you know that. So that makes me kind of lean in the other direction.
Right.
Although, I maybe it's a trick. I don't know. I don't know how it's done.
Yeah.
But real fast, and then we'll go back to animals and drugs. So, I consider these compounds, which have evolved over millions of years. Terence McKenna one time said about the mushroom says, I require the nervous system of a mammal. So I think these chemicals in some ways evolved, and I'm not sure I believe this 100%, so this is just an idea. But basically these chemicals evolved as biochemical communicators, intraspecies biochemical communicators, so that the plant world is able to talk to the humans in a way that's very powerful and direct. So when you ingest one of these substances, it's the closest you're ever going to get to talking to a tree or a plant. Right. And perhaps they, if the Gaia theory is real, if Pachamama, Mother Earth, is alive, perhaps she produced these plants to try to save herself from the crazy humans who are destroying the planet and need to be woken up. And many people get messages of, saving the environment, being better people, and all these things from these psychedelic plants. So, that's just a theory, not saying I completely believe that.
I have a friend who talked to me about his experience taking mushrooms, where he's not a big environmental guy at all. Really, right. At all. Has no interest in it, just kind of goes about his normal life and doesn't really consider it, uses plastic bottles and the whole thing, just doesn't really care. And he knows I'm a big environmental guy. And so one day we're talking and he's telling me about his experience, and he's like, dude, I took mushrooms and I kind of had this revelation where I realized that we're essentially living on this planet and we're just using everything up and we're destroying it by doing so. And it woke him up. It woke up a guy that has no interest and never went out of his way to understand the environmental impact of human society. And then suddenly took this drug and just understood it. Yep. It made sense to him that all of our actions have an outcome that most of the time harm the planet in some way. We're using resources, we're burning things, we're polluting our waterways. And I couldn't explain it. And I was like, dude, yeah, like this is my normal life. I think about this all the time. It's a shame that you had to take this to understand it, but I'm glad that you finally did. And then shortly after that, a few weeks later, or maybe a month or so later, I asked him, after you had that experience, do you think about the environment more? And he does. He said he hasn't made any significant changes, but he thinks about it on a more regular basis, and kind of that entire process, he now grasps it more than he ever did. So that
Right.
I found that really remarkable. It was like really interesting to me that it affected his brain chemistry that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think entheogens and psychedelics are they're the slap in the face that Western or capitalist culture. Not that I have a problem with either one of those things, but when we're sacrificing the environment for those things, I have a problem with that. But I think these plants and compounds are the slap in the face or the kick in the ass that Western culture needs to wake up, because we're so deep in this idea of consuming and destroying our beautiful planet. But yeah, I find it super interesting that the entheogens and the psychedelics have this effect. Like if someone asks you, well, what's the effect of cocaine? And you're like, oh, it's stimulating. You feel awake. You don't feel hungry. Okay, what's the effect of morphine? Oh, you feel sedated and it kills pain, And then if you ask, well, what's the effect of psychedelics? And it's like, well, sit down. How long do you have? Because this is going to be a 2-hour conversation about, it makes you feel in love with the planet. It makes you care more about your family. It has these strange effects that do not fit in the box of like stimulation, sedation. It's just these really weird, weird things that happen to you.
Yeah.
But before we run out of time, go ahead.
Yeah. We're gonna have to hop off soon. So okay. Yeah, let's get it in.
All right, back into it. We'll go lightning round. Some people in Pakistan smoke scorpion venom. And apparently it makes you incredibly sick for like 4 to 6 hours, like vomiting, and your head feels like someone hit you with a hammer. And then after that, you feel great. And it doesn't seem to be a cultural practice. It seems to be a practice done by a few people. And some drugs to treat cancer and HIV or AIDS have been developed from scorpion venom. In Nepal and other parts of the old world, such as around the Black Sea, there is psychoactive honey. And bees do not get intoxicated by the same compounds that we do. And they will harvest nectar or pollen from plants like Atropa belladonna, which is one of the baneful or botanicals or hexing herbs that we talked about, or plants like rhododendron. And the chemicals from these plants will concentrate in the honey. And it's known as mad honey or, drunk honey and things like that. You can actually get it in Nepal and you can get it in Turkey. But if you take too much, it's toxic, much like alcohol. So if you overdo it, you're going to get super sick. Sometime around 67 BC, Roman soldiers invaded the Black Sea region under the command of Pompey. And the enemies who were waiting for them, they lined, they put this honeycomb in various places and also little bits of food and stuff. Well, the Romans ingested the mad honeycomb because they thought it was regular honey, got super sick, and the enemy came out and killed them all.
Jesus.
So, yeah. What else? Oh, off the coast of Madagascar, there are dream fish. They are fish that make you drunk and dream. These are like mullet fish or goat fish, and certain times of the year they contain compounds that are psychoactive. Hamilton Morris has Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, which is a great show, and he investigates in one episode the dreamfish. So it has a drunkening effect, and then it also makes you dream. They're also known in Hawaii as the nightmare fish. And in Madagascar, they're actively sought out by people to use specifically as a psychoactive. And then
I don't know any of these.
No.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to do this episode, because nobody knows about this stuff. I got two more things.
Okay.
Frogs and toads have long been associated with witchcraft and shamanism and whatnot. But as far as I can tell, and if I'm wrong, someone send me a message and tell me. But as far as I can tell, no one actually licks frogs. That is a myth.
That's from Family Guy, Bob.
Right, yeah. But they do something even stranger with frogs. There's a frog called the giant monkey frog, Philomedusa bicolor, that lives in the Amazon. It's used by the Matses and other native groups, and they will, it looks like the frog's going to be drawn and quartered. They put 4 sticks in the ground and they stretch the frog out, but they don't chop it up or anything. They sort of poke it and make it angry. It excretes this white foamy stuff from its back. this foamy stuff contains novel opioid peptides, which are much, much stronger than morphine. They take a stick and burn your arm, kind of peel off that little layer of skin, and then they rub this secretion into that burn. It causes you to almost immediately start puking. You have hot flashes, blood flushing to your face, and sometimes your face swells up and makes you look like a toad, which is hilarious. There's a picture of my friend Brandon, and he looks like a frog after doing this. I've never done this one.
But wait, what are the benefits? That sounds horrible.
So after the terrible effects, and we got to remember that purging is considered a very positive thing in the Amazon because of the parasites that they would often get from water or different things. Purging was almost always a good thing. So we have to keep that in mind. But after these negative effects wear off, you feel euphoria, a great stimulation, and they say it makes your senses better. You're able to hear better, to see further. You can run faster. So the native groups in the Amazon use this before they go hunting. And they also will sometimes rub the venom in the nose of their dogs, which they think makes the dogs smell better, be able to smell game better. And then the last thing we'll go into, I got a couple more, but maybe we're running out of time. Yeah. Well, there's bighorn sheep eat a psychoactive lichen that they nibble off of rocks. And I don't have much more information than that. But yeah, bighorn sheep eat this lichen. And then there's this really new research about cicadas. And this is obviously, the cicada does not do this willingly. It gets infected by this fungus, and the fungus contains psilocybin, and it seems to intoxicate the cicada, and the cicada will fly around like in weird patterns and drop the spores of this fungus onto its cicada buddies, which then become infected. This is similar to the cordyceps mushroom, which will infect ants in the Amazon and other parts of the world. And it like invades their brain, takes over their nervous system, and causes them to climb to the tops of trees where they're eaten by birds. And then the fungal spores are then dispersed in the bird's poop, and the life cycle continues.
Man, nature's awesome.
It is. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah, I thought I've heard of that one. For some reason, I thought the fungus forces the ant to climb to like a branch above the colony, and then the spores are then protrude from the body and then sort of burst over the colony. Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
You might be right. In some cases that might be the case. Maybe I misspoke there. So people should.
I'm not sure about what I just said either. There's so many different funguses, and I think it was the first Planet Earth documentary. They had a good episode on some of these funguses, and you were able to see the way they took over the body and ended up protruding from the bodies of these insects. It was mind blowing at the time.
I think you're right. I think there's another related compound in. Yeah, that's right. There's something in snails that causes them to sort of lose their mind and climb to the top of branches. I misspoke. It's and the snails get eaten by birds, but the ant sort of just like fruits into a fungus, and the spores fly everywhere.
And they burst. They explode over the colony, and it like wipes it out. They all get more of them get infected and.
You're exactly right. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Wow. The last little anecdote I'll say, there is reports in ancient Mesoamerica of a certain, I believe it's a duck, a psychoactive duck that eats datura and other of the baneful botanicals, and the flesh of the bird then becomes psychoactive. And the Aztecs would apparently use this, although there's hardly any information about it. So there's even psychoactive birds.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, hey, listen, we appreciate you coming on again. As always, a wealth of knowledge as far as plants and animals go, and we learn a ton every time we talk to you.
Every time.
Yeah, this is really cool. And as we discussed, for those listening, Scott's going to come on again to actually take us through the tours that you offer in detail. So we'll get an idea of what it's like to actually experience the Amazon jungle with you, the animals that we'll see, the plants that we'll get to try, and we're really looking forward to that conversation. So
real absolutely.
Quick, before you jump off, send out your website one more time.
Okay. So my website is ethnoco.com. That's www.ethnoco.com. EthnoCO.com. And our motto at EthnoCO is helping people help plants help people. So yeah, check out the website. Last thing I'll leave you with, salamander brandy. Just Google it. Salamander brandy.
Salamander brandy.
Salamander brandy. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks,
Some
guys.
homework to do.
All right.
Hey, yeah, thank you very much, man. We'll be in touch.
Appreciate it.
So something that is becoming more prevalent in my mind, that as we learn more about the plants, the flora, the animal life in South America, is how important it is to preserve it, because we don't even know the extent of which we're losing in as far as medicine goes, as far as biodiversity goes. There's so much there that it's hard to calculate what's going to be lost.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's really interesting how certain governments don't really want to explore it or explore the potential benefits of a lot of these animals and psychoactive drugs and how they could help mental illnesses.
It's short-sighted, right? It always comes back to being short-sighted. And because if someone, it's not like there's no economic gain, right? And then that's typically the environment, unfortunately, doesn't have a price tag. And I think that's part of the reason it's being destroyed without any care, right?
Yeah.
But I know that there's someone, where did I see this? I don't know if it was a Netflix or like a Nat Geo documentary or something I read, but there are people now that are trying to develop a way to sort of bring the environment, put a number on the environment, essentially, is what they're trying to do, as a new form of environmental activism, and say,
I
hey,
like that.
By saving this, we save or we gain X number of dollars.
Yeah.
I need to look into that, actually. That's really interesting now. That would be a good idea for a podcast.
Yeah.
And,
Well, it's not to get too far on a tangent, but there is something that exists for trees in suburban communities and urban environments, where it essentially puts a number on the value of the tree. And it's really interesting how some like 60 to 70-year-old shade trees, like big trees that provide a lot of canopy and cover over buildings or over sidewalks and pavement, are valued at $75,000 to $100,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, that's, you know what? I'm going to write that down. Let's explore that further. So anyway, Scott, as always, very informative, great conversationalist, and we were happy to have him on. So check out, if you liked the episodes, not only check out the previous ones, but go to his website. And when you can travel again and you want to go to South America, he's your guy. EthnoCO. Check it out.
Yeah. Yep. So if you're whatever podcast form you're listening on, leave us a rating and follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook. Shoot us a message on Instagram or Facebook if you have a suggestion on our next guest. You can also reach us at our email, thetravelersblueprint.com. And thank you very much for listening, and tune in next week.